Hello viewers. In this video of 8085 microprocessors, I am going to discuss about 82C55A, which is basically a programmable peripheral interface device, and which is used to interface various kinds of input-output devices with 8085 microprocessor. So basically, if you want to interface any input or output device with your 8085 microprocessor, then you need to use this IC called 82C55A, or simply 8255. So this is basically called a PPI. PPI means programmable peripheral interface. Programmable because you can program which port will be used as an input and which port will be used as an output. And programmable peripheral means peripheral device means an input output device. So basically, for interfacing any input output device, such as say analog to digital converters, or maybe some display controller or any keyboard, so any input or output device, you need to use this 82C55A. So this actually acts as an interface between your output input devices and your microprocessor. So this is this is a block diagram of 8255A. It has three ports. Okay, port A, port B, and port C. So as you can see, each port C is divided into, okay, first let me tell you that each port is having 8 lines, okay, or 8 pins. So for port A there are 8 pins on this IC port, for port B there are 8 pins on this IC, and similarly for port C there are 8 lines. So 8 into 3, 24 lines are there in total. So and each port has its own address. Okay, we'll talk about addresses later, but just keep in mind that each port, this is not actually 2 pins, there are actually 8 pins in each port. Okay, now port C is divided into 2 parts. There are 8 pins total. So the upper 4 pins is called port C upper, and the lower port C pins are called port C lower. So now these the combination of port A and port C upper means these 8 pins and these 4 pins, the combination of port A and port C upper together is called group A, and the combination of port C lower and port B is called group B. Alright, so now apart from these 3 ports, there is another important thing called control word register. Okay, so control word register is an 8-bit register in which you have to write the control word. Now control word you write for 2 purposes. One is for bit set reset purpose, and one is for input output mode purpose, for setting the input output mode of a microprocessor, of a 8255. So suppose you have connected an input device with port A, say keyboard. So you need to first make this port as an input port. You need to tell that this is an input port. Suppose you have connected an output device with port B, then you have to say that port B is an output port. So for controlling for specifying which port will be used as what type of peripheral device, so that we have to specify by writing a control word in the control word register in input output mode. We'll take an example and see. And for another thing is bit set reset mode or BSR mode. This means basically bit set reset means setting a bit means what? Setting a bit means making it 1, and resetting a bit means making it 0. So for making bits 0 and 1, which bits? The bits of port C. Suppose if you want to, there are 8 bits of port C, isn't it? Suppose you want to suppose port C has 8 bits, so PC7, PC6, PC5, PC4, PC3, PC2, PC1 and PC0. These are the 8 bits. And suppose you want to set PC0 as 1, or you want to set PC2 as 0 or something like that. So for that reason we are using the BSR mode. So BSR mode is used mainly for setting or resetting the bits of port C. Alright. Now yes, input output mode, in while setting these ports as input output mode, okay, we'll take an example and it will be more clear. So yeah, this is the control word. So for setting the ports as input or output, you have to write a control word, and you have to write that control word into the control word register, which is a register located inside the 8255. Okay, so the control word is of 8 bits, and this is the MSB, this is the LSB. Let me tell you how to write the control words. Now suppose when you are using the control word for setting the input output ports, you have to make this, you have to write D7 as 1. You have to make this D7, you have to make D7 as 1, and when you want to use the control word register for the BSR mode, you need to write a 0. Okay, now for input output mode we will be writing D7 as 1. Okay, now D6, D5, these two bits are used to specify whether you want to use mode 0, mode 1 or mode 2. These are 3 modes which are used for communicating with the input output devices. But the good news is that you don't have to study mode 1 and mode 2 now. We'll confine ourselves only up to mode 0, and mode 0 is the simplest mode, that is simple input output for port A, B and C. So we'll be only using mode 0. So to use mode 0, we will set, alright, okay, another thing I missed out. Yes, okay, you have to individually specify for group A and group B. Remember, I said group A means port A and port C upper, and the rest of the part is group B. Alright, so if you want to select mode for group A, then you have to specify D6, D5 as these 3 accordingly. But since here we will be only using mode 0, so we will always write 00 in this D6, D5 bits. Okay, now group yes, now D4 bit is used to specify whether port A will be used as an input or output. If you are writing 1 in D4, then it is used as an input, and for writing 0, you are setting it as an output port. Alright, now port C upper. Port C upper means PC7, PC6, PC5 and PC4. So if you want to set port C upper as input or output port, you have to write 1 or 0 accordingly. Alright, and this D2 bit is used for mode selection of group B. Group B means port B and port C lower. Okay, so you are selecting you will, since we already said that we will be only using mode 0, so we will be writing D2 as 0 always. Now this bit is used for setting whether port B is input or output accordingly, and D0 is used for specifying whether port C will be used as an input or output. Port C lower will be used as an input or output. So please see that we can use this port C upper and port C lower individually. Means it is possible that you can use port C lower as input and port C upper as output. It is possible, but for port A and port B we cannot divide it as port A upper or port A lower like that, because port A has to be, port A altogether is an input port or port A altogether is an output port. Similarly for port B. Alright. Now let me, for the sake of giving you an example, let me tell you. Suppose just a minute. Yes. This is a diagram in which you are using 82C55A to interface display controller and a keyboard consisting of 4 switches. Okay, this is the arrangement. You don't have to understand much right now, just see what is happening. These are the 4 keys that are attached with the port C upper of 8255. So from here you give an input, and accordingly what happens, you get a display here. Okay, but yes, to get a display you have to first send a signal, send the data, take the data from here and then send the data to port B. Okay, so how you will send the data, that we'll see later, but we are sending a data in port B. This is basically a display controller. This controls what these LEDs will display, what numbers these will be display. So for that you have to first send the data from into port B. Well, port B is sending data into this ID0 to ID7 pins, and PC1 and PC0 here are used to send some pulses. So this is also an output port, and port B is also an output port, since you are sending the data byte here. Alright, and port A is not used here. Okay, so let us write the control word for this. Yes, so now first this my microprocessor is here this side. Okay, we are sending the signals through this these lines to 82C55. We will see that later in detail, but now we want to set the input output port, right? So for writing the input output mode correctly, we have to write this particular byte into the control word register. So the D7 will be 1 because we are using the CWR for writing the input output mode. So this will be 1. Now as I said, D6 and D5 will always be 0. D6 and because these are the mode selection bits and we are always using mode 0, so I set it as 0 0. Now D4, what does D4 stand for? D4 is basically D4 specifies whether port A is input or an output. So you see in this figure, mm, we haven't used port A of 8255. So whenever any port of 8255 is not used, we will set it as input always. Alright, so I'll set port A as input. uh, yes. Now port D3 means where it port C lower or port C upper is input or output. Let us see from this figure. Port C upper means this part, and a keyboard is attached to this part, so it will certainly take the input from the keyboard. So port C upper is the uh, input. So D3 will be 1. Now D2 stands for mode selection of group B, and I have already said that we will be only using mode 0 for both the groups.